Bom dia a todas, bom dia a todos. Bem-vindo a uma nova edição do Amanhã do Futuro Trabalho. Isso vai ser um evento em inglês, então, para quem quiser ter a tradução em português, vocês podem ir nos comentários, vocês têm o link. E eu, a partir de agora, vou começar então a falar em inglês. So, again, hi everyone. Welcome to a new edition of O Amanhã do Futuro Trabalho, a joint initiative between MIT Sloan Management Review Brasil, Trata-se, Stefanini, and Fundação Dom Cabral. I'm Paul Ferreira, Director of the Leadership Center at Fundação Dom Cabral and Professor of Strategic Management. In this initiative, we aim at being a think tank action, which promotes an understanding of how the nature of work is changing and its implications for people and organizations' lives, the world of business, and more broadly for the economy. We do this namely through live events, like this one, where we bring together academics and practitioners to present and discuss their experiences, their insights, their views on the world and the implications of the changes, again, in the nature of the work. You can find more about our previous episodes on our website, amanhãdofuturo.com.br, and additional also materials, some studies, papers, articles, so please do not hesitate. Today, the focus of our discussion is a novel managerial ability, data storytelling, and we will have two special guests to guide us through. So Daniel Franklin, who is the commercial director of Scala, one of the successful ventures of the group Stefanini, and Martin Epler, who is the chair of the communications and media department at the University of St. Gallen. And before we get into the core of the discussion, I would like to ask both of you to tell us how you got interested in the topic in the first place. So very briefly, in like 1 minute, how did you get to this topic? Danielle, if you would like to please start.
Sure. Hello, Paul. Hello, everybody. Actually, as we've been seeing the world going to be data-driven, we've been seeing a lot of companies struggling to get to this point where they are data-driven. So people need to care more about the data, and for that, they will need to read that as they read a book. Read data so it becomes an information. So we are here to discuss how we get to teach companies how to do this.
Very good. And you, Martin, how did you come across this topic? I know it's for a long time. I remember you were my MBA professor a couple of years ago, and you were already discussing about this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Bom dia, everyone. It's great to be in this session. I've always researched for the last 25 years how managers communicate with experts. Now specialists try to inform decision makers. And today, like Danielle said, this is done a lot through data. And so I really believe Paul is right when saying that data storytelling must be any manager's, any professional's ability, because the language of business today is often data. And so I think it would be a mistake not to focus on that if my research domain is the communication between experts and managers, because they often do talk via data, via findings. So I'm looking forward to a lively session. Back to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in the next couple of minutes, I will briefly introduce today's topic. You already gave a very interesting background context, but I will try to complement with a couple of information. Then each of you, so Martin and Daniel, you will have around 20 minutes to explore a specific dimension of the topic. And after that, we will open the floor for a broad Q&A session. So we are here for now 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I'm sure it's going to be very insightful. Please, we also want this event to be as interactive as possible, so do not hesitate to share your questions in the chat. I'm sure you are all used to that, so it's going to be very important in the second part of our event to really have your questions so we can make sure that we are as, again, insightful, informative, and useful as possible. So just a few background information on the topic and why do we think it's very important to discuss about this today. So back in 2017, The Economist published a story titled "The World's Most Valuable Resource is No Longer Oil, but Data." Since its publication, the topic has generated a great deal of discussion, and data is the new oil has become a common refrain. I think I usually hear this like at least once a week when I talk to executives. So it's something that is really being, I think, pervasive in our discussions and in executive discussions. And what this catchy sentence was meant to reflect is that the ability to deploy data as a competitive business asset is what has distinguished a set of well-established data-rich companies who have reigned as market leaders over the course of the past several decades. And I think we are all familiar with some of these big names, big companies that have been very successful in that. But I think what is also important is that for sure it will certainly continue to determine leadership in the new era of big data, AI, and machine learning. So if you assume that data is an important business asset, I think what is important to the next question is how basically it is managed by senior executives. All managers are paying attention to data. So it's the practical implications of this attention and management by senior executives that we want to explore and discuss this morning by looking at elements such as how it is changing and creating specific roles in companies. I'm sure you all have noticed the growth of, for example, chief digital officers roles in large firms. So there's a very recent very recent survey from 2021 from New Vantage Partners, and they identified that 65% of the companies reported that they had a chief data officer in place. So in 2021, in the sample that they run, in the study that they run, 65% of the companies mentioned having a chief digital officers, and they ran the same survey in 2020. And only 12% of the firms reporting having a CDO. So it's a significant difference. And if you look at the net, and this is not just one industry, but it's across industries. We see these movements in industries with substantial data, and specifically retail, healthcare, and even governments to some extent. So another element beyond roles also that we are going to look is how it's changing and creating specific new critical skills, such as, for example, data literacy. So which is the ability to parse and organize complex data, to interpret and summarize information, to develop predictions based on that, to appreciate also the ethical implications of algorithms. We're also familiar with very recent documentaries, for example, in Netflix regarding that. So according to studies, around 90% of business leaders cite data literacy as a key to company success, but only 25% of workers feel confident in their data skills. So again, we see a huge gap, and I'm sure that Danielle and Martin are going also to explain us how we can close this gap, or at least to narrow it. And I think we are also going to, of course, discuss how it is changing an important management ability, one of the most maybe important, one of the most important skill or activity for managers in this complex world, which is communication. We know that communication is very important to deploy strategy, also to have more engaged employees. So it's very important to understand how managers have been forced to develop an internal and an external common language for speaking about data, and how they can use data also to relate to business and to the new environment that we are. So these are some of the topics that we aim to cover this morning. And without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Danielle so she can start focusing on the specific dimensions she wants to cover. So Danielle, please.
Thank you, Paul. Actually, are you guys hearing like a okay?
Yes, it's fine.
So I'm gonna talk about a lot of the things you just said, just to put more context in all we just we are speaking right now. So let me share my presentation very quickly. Can you see it? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we do, Daniel.
Thank you.
Everything is fine.
I cannot see you anymore, so anything wrong, just tell me, please. So, guys, as Paul has just spoke, we already know since some time now that all companies will be and must be data driven. So all the decision will be made based on data. That means that really data is the new oil, as Paul just said. So in order to the companies to achieve that, they have to prepare themselves, and it's not only technology that we are speaking about. You're speaking about technology. We are speaking about people skill. We are speaking about processes. We are speaking about, most of all, about culture. And only companies in a really, as we know, all the people are looking for, all the companies are trying to communicate to their customers one-to-one. And in order to do that, the data and a company being data driven, it's the main factor that will define success and survival. None of us actually have no more patience to be receiving like marketing SMS or letters or email that is addressed to a whole bunch of people, not to yourself, not your interests. So, as I just said, if you understand the data, all the information that you have about your customer one-to-one, you'll be more prepared to communicate to them one-to-one. That's what we call hyper customization, and that's what your customer are looking for. So when a company says it is data driven, or it wants to become data driven, it's not just because the company has a data lake or works with machine learning, or it has a lot of math algorithms and everything to be data driven, to be considered data driven. It's much more than that. You have to worry about things that I'm going to talk about a little bit right now. So I already have my data lake. I already use algorithms and machine learning. Why aren't you saying that I'm data driven? So what then? First of all, and that I think is the most one of the hardest things in the companies, and the things that companies are struggling the most. It is about data governance. Much before you start using data to become information, to become insights, so you can communicate inside your company to your managers, to your executives, or even to your customers. You have to prepare the data. And that is where the pain points of most of the companies today, because you have to be careful that your data is secure, and that your data is reliable, that the data is available to everybody, and that the data it has quality. If you do not do this, what can happen is that you have the wrong data, and then you have the wrong information, and then you have the wrong insights to give anyone. So that's the first thing you have to do. It's to look at all the data you have and guarantee that it's working, that it's secure, reliable, and available, and it has quality. Here, we have to get worried about all the laws or the compliance laws and all the things that make you have all the data that you have all the data secure, so you're not private. It has to be private and everything else. So once you guarantee that you have the good data, then you can worry about other things. So the other things that you have is your data. Data democratization is the other things all the company wants, and have to be in order to be data driven. Once you have all the data, you have to get the data available to everybody that wants to use it to make good decisions, make good business decisions, and to get insights. And for that, once more, you have to give the people ways that they can access those data, and they need to be able to read that and use that to get all the business decision they want. Last but far from least, Paul just said a little bit. We are talking about, a lot of you must have heard about data literacy, and if not, you're going to be hearing that a lot. And that is the capability of your employees to read, understand, create, and communicate data as information. As I just said, communicate is what you need to do the most. It has to be something very important. And if you cannot read those data, if you are not literate to read data, you must interpret the data in the wrong way. And so your insights will be wrong, and your information, and you communicate wrong to the people you want to communicate. So data literacy is a whole bunch of, it's a whole matter to discuss here. It has a lot to do with culture in the company. So when you are working with data literacy, you have to provide your employees with training, how to read those data. You have to give them access to the data, as I said. So this is one of the most important things. One of when the company gets all the employees, or at least the employees that will read data, to know how to do it, then just going back a little bit, as I said, once you have all your data ready, reliable, and secure, and private, and everything, then you can democratize all the data. But it doesn't matter if you don't teach the people how to read this, then they won't know how to do it, and so whatever you did before is not going to be good, because you do have the data, the data is good, the data is ready, but people do not know how to read it. So this is one of the most important skills that all the employees will have to have in order to in the future of work. So once you do how to know, you do know how to do this, you're going to be ready to have a data-driven company. So I'm going to so just saying a little bit about the skills for the professionals of tomorrow. They'll need to be data literate, and they'll need to read and to know how to work with data, to look to the data and know how to analyze it and to get insights about it. And at least, and that's what Martin will speak a lot, to communicate with data. And that's not something very easy, but we have some methods, and that's what is the study and all the work that Martin is doing. And he's going to talk about how you do that with storytelling. And so what if, instead of just reading like raw data or data written in any way, what if you can communicate data with storytelling? Storytelling is something that you've been using a lot in design thinking, which is very nice, and it's very easy to understand because it's visual. So once you bring that methodology of storytelling with data and get those together so you can communicate to people, I think it's going to be much easier to everybody to understand what they are looking at and to get better insights, better information, and better everything. So that's the end of my presentation, Paul. So I'd like to go back to you and let Martin say everything about storytelling.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
Yes, Martin, you can go.
All right. I trust you see my screen. You see the screen right now?
Yes, we do.
5 magic
Yes, we
ingredients
do.
of storytelling. I like to make it very specific what storytelling means for the data context. I want to give you 5 very simple things that will help you relate data to your audience, to communicate it in a hopefully engaging and understandable manner. We have a book coming out on how to talk about data with the Financial Times soon, and you're getting a very exclusive preview on that. I want to talk about our approach to data storytelling first, that is summarized in the design acronym. I want to then get very specific quickly on the 5 things you can do to explain data better and to communicate data in a way that is actionable. I want to then turn this into a tool that you can use, that we've used for a number of organizations, called the Data Storytelling Canvas, a very simple technique to prepare your data stories. And of course, I want to show you an example, a real life example that focuses on diversity data, how to get more women into management and how to use data for that mission. And briefly at the end, maybe 2 elements from our design approach to data about the future of data storytelling and where it will go. And then I'm looking forward to question and answers with you. Our approach is a very simple one. We have identified in our research and work with organizations, ranging from the European Central Bank to Nike to Porsche and many others. There are 6 sort of big areas that you need to focus on when it comes to analytics and data. Making sure that it's focused and decluttered, that you really focus on the essential, because we all are dealing with too much information already, that you emphasize the most important insights. Today, I'm going to talk mainly about how to storyfy, how to storytell your data. But what is equally important is how to involve your audiences in making sense of data. We're seeing a trend away from data presentations towards data facilitation, interactive sessions. I'm also going to show you quickly today how to give meaning to data, how to make it more understandable. I think that's a key part that's related actually to data storytelling. And of course, one of the key rules of any data presentation is do not manipulate your audience with the data. Avoid distortions, right? And here you have a few examples. What decluttering means. Decluttering means getting rid of everything that distracts, like a border, like background color, like legends, like unnecessary detail or grid lines, right? So decluttering is really letting the data speak purely. Emphasizing means highlighting, for example, through color, your most important element in the data. Emphasizing means showing the so what, directing the attention of your audience. That's very important when you communicate data. But today we'll focus on the 5 magic ingredients of data storytelling and how you can use the storytelling canvas as a tool. I do want to mention, however, that interactive forms of data presentation are ever more important. For example, what we did in numerous organizations, from private banks to big public institutions, we printed out key data, put it on the wall, give the decision makers pens and have them annotate the charts so that they can have good data discussions about them. I think that's a very effective practice. Or doing that with touch screens, as for example, Procter & Gamble, the consumer good giant, does it already. Or here's an example of how you can give meaning to data by comparing it. It is one thing if I tell you that 5.2 million hectares are lost each year in the Amazon forest. It is quite another if I tell you that this is equivalent to the size of a soccer field being lost every single second in the Amazon rainforest due to deforestation, right? So making data accessible, giving it meaning, for example, through comparisons, is certainly an important point, as is avoiding distortions. This is from Fox News, by cropping, for example, the y-axis and not starting at 0, and then exaggerating changes that aren't that big. There are many ways in which you can manipulate, but today I think people will react very negatively if they feel that they're being data massaged, that the data is being manipulated. And by the way, you can find this data design guide also on LinkedIn. I have posted this on the slide here below, and you will of course get the slides to this presentation. And this is part from our forthcoming book, How to Talk About Data. But let's get to the storifying part. And I hope you recognize the little ears there on the S. That's of course from a very famous story from Shrek. And you'll see what the connection to Shrek is in a minute. So what are the 5 magic ingredients of storytelling? The 5 most important things that you need to do if we want to communicate data in a meaningful and engaging way. Let me go through them. The bridge symbolizes the chasm that you need to overcome with your audience. You need to establish common ground early. You need to connect data to what the audience cares about. That's what data storytelling is all about. Tell them the why before the what. Sell it before you tell it. Tell them why they should care about the data first. That's lesson number 1 in data storytelling. Tell people why they should listen, why the data matters to them. And show them data that they easily understand first, and then make it more complicated. Create common ground, connect the data to the audience, give them examples of the data that you're talking about. A recent data scientist that I listened to talked about expense analytics, and he told us right away, he's talking about train tickets, airplane tickets, hotel room expenses. He made it concrete right away to create common ground. But the real art of data storytelling is dramaturgy, how you structure the data into 3 acts: situation, complication, resolution. That's a structure for your data that will engage the audience. And I will show you an example of that in a minute. But of course, communication without emotion can never be a story. You need to create curiosity for your data. You need to make it engaging by showing your enthusiasm about it, your pride, or your shock about maybe counterintuitive data. So this may be culture dependent, differ from one country to the other, but nobody wants to see a lifeless robot present data. Which brings me to the 4th point, the storyteller. You are part of the data story. Give it your own twist, give it your own voice. Tell what you find particularly striking about the data, right? Or how this relates to your experience. I think that's a very powerful combination, your experience together with the data that you've gathered. And then the last and final point, every good story, you notice, has a so what, a morale, leaves you with a takeaway, and so should data. Data should make a point for action, for decision. So making the data impactful is showing various options that ensue from it, what you can do with the data, what it points towards in terms of action opportunities. Let me illustrate these 5 points with one of my favorite movies, Shrek, hence the S with the 2 ears, and then apply it to data. So first I want to make it memorable. The 5 magic ingredients of data storytelling, Shrek style. I hope you've seen one of the Shrek movies. It establishes common ground with the audience by showing Shrek in a situation that we may have encountered, like being in a bubble bath. It then adds to this three-part story of drama where you have a beginning, middle, end, right? That's important to structure your data into beginning, situation, middle, drama, surprises, detail, and end, resolution or action. In the case of the Shrek movie, of course, the climax is when Shrek has to fight the dragon. You need to think about what's the drama in your data. Where can you put excitement in it? Surprise, for example. And of course, like in Shrek, when he shows a lot of emotions, we get emotionally involved. That's why I think you need to also address emotions in your data storytelling, such as humor, surprise, shock sometimes, maybe envy if your competitors have better performance data than you have. And there are a whole lot of other emotions that you can trigger and should trigger through data. Number 4, storyteller, when it comes to the movie Shrek, it's very ironic the way the whole story is told, with a lot of references to contemporary sort of pop culture, like you can see here with this allusion to the Hollywood sign in the country that is called Far, Far Away. So think about what you can do to make your presentation style unique, right? You don't have to dress up in a turtleneck and sneakers like Steve Jobs and say one more thing in every presentation, but you can give the data your unique style. And last but not least, what's the takeaway in Shrek? Of course, that love can find a way. He falls in love with Fiona and she for him, which is something we didn't expect, right? It's about the inner values and not your outer look. The morale of a data story is the decision you should take in light of that data. So let us apply those 5 magic ingredients to data. What does that mean? And I think the next slide is the most important one of my presentation. So if you forget everything else, you may want to note what's coming now. Every good data story has these features. You start not with the most complicated part, but you ease your audience into the data. You don't start with the methodology, the statistical procedures, the machine learning algorithms, no. You start with data that your audience can easily get, so that they have already an experience of getting it, that they don't shy away. I think that's key in beginning any data story. Give simple examples like the ones for expense analytics, an airplane ticket, a hotel night stay, right, or a train ticket. And then don't jump right into details. Think of Shrek first, the situation in which he is in his forest. Show overview data first that explains the situation, and then take a deep dive for more complication, and end it with data that points towards solutions, towards specific decision or action points. And engage the emotions by, for example, having the audience guess the data before you show it to them. That creates engagement and curiosity. Or ask a question that they really want to know, and then answer it through data in the course of your presentation, right? Or in your report, or in your dashboard. Enthusiasm, I think, is one of the most powerful emotions you can use. If you want to see an example of an enthusiastic data story, check out Hans Rosling, right? Who's one of the best data storytellers out there, who was. And give the data a voice, a perspective, a memorable feature by the way that you convey the data, you as a storyteller. And use titles for your charts that give you a so what. So not sales development 2018 to 2021. That would not be a good title for a chart, but rather increasing sales to new products, right? Or we need to revamp our product portfolio. Give key takeaways, a big idea, or decision pointers. So let me illustrate that in concluding with an example, a real life example, where the issue is diversity in management. For that, we're going to use the data storytelling canvas. It takes the same elements and helps us organize them. Think of the subject, so it's diversity, the audience, which in our case was top managers, the goal to shock them into action with the data about the lack of diversity in management, and then how to set the scene by creating common ground, making our point with situation, complication, resolution, with a number of bar charts in our case, you will see them, And then ending with a morale, with a conclusion, with a call to action, right? And this hopefully with a bit of emotion. So next to those elements, we also need emotional triggers. You need to plan for that. With which data set can you trigger which emotion? Is it humor, surprise, worry, curiosity? I know this is a lot to take in. You can find this data storytelling canvas also online. It gives you a good plan to prepare your data stories, your presentations, with the key things you need to consider. Your voice as a goal as a storyteller, how to connect with the audience, how to create emotions, but also how to create drama, a narrative structure for your data, and in the end, a clear so what. Research shows that the call to action should be threefold. So a good way to end the data story is to say there are three things we need to do. For example, short-term, medium-term, long-term, or locally, regionally, and nationally. A good way to end the data storytelling is always with a three-part list. You see that highlighted in our canvas over here, right? It's a sweet spot. It gives you more credibility when you can boil down the data to just three parts. So here's an example. A whole lot of data about a particular company that asked its women, do you want to apply for a management position in our company? And 70% of the women said no. The actual share of management in that company among women, it's only 15%. It's another data. And by the way, pie charts you'll see are not the best way to present data. I will show you an improved version in a minute. When you look at this over time, the development of female share in management over time in this company from 14 to 18, 2000, that is, you see it's always remained constant, women, and you also see that this has been mostly in lower management. A little bit more data here. You see lower management is the only area where women are actually represented in management. I hope that's not the case in your typical Brazilian company. The share of workforce, however, the majority are women. 60% of the staff are women, right? Now, what I have just shown you is not a data story. It's just a bunch of data thrown together. This is how you should not present data. How can we turn this very same data into a story? First, by giving it an action title. We want to finally mobilize women for management by giving them more flexibility. And by sequencing now the data into first, situational data. The share of workforce in our company, as you know, this is creating common ground, is 60% women, but we only have 15% of those 60% in management. That's your situation. So first you give people the situation, something that your audience perhaps already knows, simple data. Then you introduce the complication, but wait, surprise, they're actually only in lower management, are the women. And here you go for drama, also through a different format, we had 0% change in this in the last 5 years. So data storytelling also means mixing formats. You want to be careful with pie charts. Here I just took them to create common ground, but usually bar charts are much better. And then never let the story end in complication, end it in resolution. Why are women not in more management position? We also have data for that. A majority of them does not want. Why? And here you see I combined the data to tell a simpler story. 80% of the women say because of a lack of flexibility. And about 30% because they don't feel the support. So that would be a simple example of a data story where you make it simpler, you structure it, you give it an action title, and you end with clear directions of what needs to be done. In this case, provide more flexibility for women in terms of when they work and where they work, so that we can finally move the needle on the 0% change in female representation in management. I hope this has given you a flavor for data storytelling. There are a few other elements that are important. Facilitation, I've mentioned as an important trend in data storytelling, where you ask people, why does this data matter to you? Where you involve them in sort of making it relevant, where you create curiosity by asking a question like, have you ever wondered why we have so few women in management, for example, right? I think what is also very important in involving the audience is involving people to think along with the data, guessing results, and then making sure they have understood it, right? A good story only works if people are getting it or understanding it. But you have to do this in a face-saving way. So not, did everybody understand these statistics? Do you know what a regression is? No. Ask in a more diplomatic way, like, what are things here that other people, your colleagues, might not understand? Because managers sometimes don't admit they don't understand the data. So you have to really ask in a very diplomatic way. I want to end with how to give meaning to data. And if you remember our design formula, there's many ways in which you can make it simpler to understand data. Here's an example to understand the market capitalization of Zoom by comparing it to the biggest airlines, right? This gives you much better sense of the meaning of the data. Or by adding small comments to important points in your data that explain the charts. Or one more, by showing how the data has changed since the last time and whether it changes positive, green, or whether it is negative for your company. Or if you want, add symbols and imagery to your data to make it simpler, as this infographic, that's a Sankey diagram that we often use in analytics, of who Trump, when he was president, bashed while he was using Twitter. And you can see the media took the biggest hits of his bashing. That's also a way, using symbols and imagery to tell a more engaging emotional story. So this brings me to the end. Storytelling in the data context means connecting data to your audience and what they already know and what they need to know to make a decision. It also means structuring your data into a 3-act story: situation, complication, resolution, engaging some emotion like enthusiasm, and giving the data your voice, your emphasis, your unique perspective, and always ending with action implication. So the action implication of this tutorial is try to storyfy your data. You can use the canvas I've shown you to make sure you think of all the elements. As Steve Jobs said, sometimes it's better to plan in analog and then go digital. And the canvas gives you a very good analog way to plan your data storytelling. And as an outlook, don't think presentation, think interaction, think facilitation, how to involve your audience and go that extra mile, making your data accessible, giving it meaning, for example, through symbols or by comparing it to something that the audience already knows. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Wow, thank you very much, Daniel and Martin. These were really very interesting presentations, and what I really, at least I feel by listening to you, is that you walk your talk. No, both of your presentations were also very, very clearly designed. They were very different from the kind of presentations that we normally have or see when we have a business meeting, for example, or the kind of event. So thank you very much also to walk your talk. Well, so now it's the moment that everyone also is waiting for us, which is the possibility to really bring some of the questions of the audience and get specific answers to some of the issues, concerns that you may have. But before we get started with this, I have I think a question also that many of us have. Danny and Martin, when, in the case of Martin, when the book is going to be released, and are these charts included? And for both of you, is it possible to get these presentations?
For sure. Paul, you already have it. I've sent it to you. You can make it available to anyone. For sure, as a researcher and academic, I'm all about sharing. So feel free to share that. And yes, all of these charts will be also available in the book that's coming out early of next year with FT Publishing, Financial Times Publishing, Pearson. It's called How to Talk About Data, a Visual Guide to Data Fluency. Data fluency is just another term for what Danielle called data literacy. And it explains data storytelling, but it also uses storytelling to explain statistics and machine learning and how to have better conversations about data, even when data gives you bad messages, right? Data is not always positive. How do you have controversial discussions about data is another topic that we treat therein.
Paul, of course, I can send it to you, and you can do whatever you want with the presentation. Send to the people. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's much appreciated, I think, by all of us. Good. So maybe as a starter, I would like to get back. So when we are talking about the future of work, we are also talking about some professions that are disappearing and some new professions that are arising. And as I was mentioning in the beginning, so what we have seen in many companies is the rise of chief digital officers. And I would like to have your view on that. So how do you look at these new roles? And more broadly, maybe what is one of the questions we always have is who is the owner of data in companies? You see, you both said that data is pervasive in companies. Everyone should be interested in knowing more about the data, and of course being able to interpret and communicate about the data. But who is the owner? So maybe my question, and starting by you, Danny, is do you also feel this rise of chief digital officers and many other functions that we have been what we have seen, chief privacy officers? I see that there are also some chief analytics officer. There are some combinations of these functions. Can you tell us a bit more what you have seen? What do you think makes sense? How companies are evolving regarding that?
Yeah, sure, Paul. That's actually one of my favorite subjects in the last few months, because I've been studying a lot about the companies and where they are putting the responsibility for the data. And it's very interesting, as no industry has the same answer to that question: who is responsible for the data? I've been seeing companies struggling where all the part what I spoke about earlier about data governance. So they say that the people responsible for that should be IT, people in technology. So those guys should have the data architects, the data engineers. So they will prepare the data, get ready, get secure, get available. So another people in that would be the data scientists or the data analysts, or so some companies have the CDOs with those people under it. So those are responsible for getting the machine learning algorithms and preparing the data to get insights, so the business people would consume it. So you'd have the people taking care of data in IT, and people making insights out of this data under a CDO or something like that.
Mhm.
I've seen other companies, like the financial companies, getting everything together under the CDO. You have the data architects, the data engineers, and the data scientists, everybody under a CDO, and then those getting the data ready and getting the insights, so people from business can receive it and read it and make business decision. So it's very interesting, because no companies have the same answer for that. And I don't think there is a right question, the right answer for that. I think it depends the level of your maturity level as a data-driven company. It depends how much money you get to invest in that. It depends how your board is understand how important data is for your company to make big decisions. So it really depends. But I've seen a little bit of everything. So you have like all the chief XO roles, but under that you can have the data engineers, the data architects, and the data analysts, and the data in machine and the data scientists. They can be all at the same place, or they can be like spread all over the company depending on your maturity?
Yeah, I would agree with Danielle on that. Part of the data literacy that every manager needs to have today is understanding the different roles of analytics in a company. And I agree with the 6 that Danielle just mentioned. You need a chief data officer who puts in place the strategy and facilitates this with the top management. Chief data officer is what I would call it. Then you need a data architect who sets out the big plan of the key applications that need to be in place. You need a data engineer who can break that down into implementable solutions. You need data scientists who know the methods, the procedures, the statistical, algorithms. And you need data analysts who can then work with that and prep it and make it in a way that it can be used. And a new role that Danielle hasn't mentioned that I see popping up now, that also relates to a question that somebody asked in the chat, is the data dandy, or the data facilitator, or the data storyteller, who helps the data analyst really create impactful presentations of the data, helps him with, or her, with the design of dashboards and reports. Sort of the dandy who helps make the data more attractive, make the data more impactful, the data storyteller. That's certainly an emerging role. So we don't only see jobs going away because of digitization, we see these new jobs also popping up, as these 6 examples show, from the chief data officer, the data architect, the engineer, the data scientist, the data analyst, all the way to the data facilitator.
Good. And what I like with your clarification on roles, first, we know that it's very important for organizations to be effective. We need to be clear about what are the roles, who is doing what, basically, what are the skills of these people. But what I also like is that sometimes the confusion that I see is the confusion between data and technology. And the fact that you explicit these different kind of roles, I think we start giving some also clarification on what are the differences maybe and the commonalities between data and technology. Because if you agree that these are some things that are different, we also have different management approaches to that. Would you agree with that, with this distinction? And maybe could you help us clarify even more the difference between data and technology?
Sure. Well, and that's very interesting that you brought that, because it's very common that you are looking for somebody that you work with data in your company, and you put the wrong person in the wrong role, and that gets if you get a data scientist to work with data engineering or data architect, that guy won't know how to do it. We are talking about a guy that works machine learning, algorithm, math algorithms, statistics algorithm, and you put those guys to work with ETL or data warehouse and things like that. They won't know how to do it. And the other way around is the same. You cannot put a data engineer to program in Python to do some statistics methods, because they won't know how to do that either. So those are specific roles that once you know what you want, you have to look for the right one. Otherwise, you won't get the work done. So, Martin, go ahead. You're going to say something.
I just wanted to say, this is also an opportunity for small companies to take interns from the university who can help them set up a program, small steps, but be sure you pick the right student for the right job, right? Distinguish between infrastructure people who help you build up the technology, engineers, right? And those that help you analyze the data, who are well-versed in statistics, right? Who machine learning and AI is nothing else than advanced statistics.
Yeah.
So it's 2 clearly different roles. Don't expect, if you're a small company, the same poor student that you hire as an intern to both set up the data, make it secure, scalable, know which infrastructure to provide and the user management that goes with it, and know the statistical procedures to crunch your data. Those are 2 different profiles. But I think you can go far by, if you're a very small company that doesn't have the resources, to give students a learning ground and perhaps catch them early before they graduate, because once they graduate, they're very hard to to recruit, right? But get them early, have contact with universities, get students who are enrolled in analytics program or in data engineering programs, but then put them in the right role. Don't make the mistake that Danny referred to, that you put an engineer into the role of a data scientist, which he or she is clearly not.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
what I can tell you, Paul, also is that, just to be clear, when you are talking about data engineers and data architects, usually those people are from technology, and usually people the data scientists, they come from like math graduate or statistics graduate, not technology.
Thank you. I would like to elaborate a bit more on the distinction maybe between the size of the companies and the resources that they have and how able or capable they are to deal with data management. There is a question from Ariela de Medeiros Rosa, who is bringing this topic, and this is a very important topic for our audience because we have also, of course, large companies, but we also have middle-sized companies. And she's asking why middle-sized companies have so much difficulties in dealing with data. Is it because of the cost? Is it because of some of the elements that you mentioned, the fact that it's difficult to hire the right people, and maybe these people prefer to work for large companies or more fancy companies, let's say? Is it because what do you think are the biggest difficulties for mid-sized companies,
I
and
think
what
there
they
are
could do about that?
three reasons for that. I completely agree with Ariela there. One reason is cost, for sure. Setting up data lakes, buying licenses for tools like Tableau or Power BI or your Oracle databases, and it's costly. Although there are open source and some free software available, usually it's cost intensive, and that breaks the neck of the small companies. The second one is manpower and talent. And you're right, it's hard for a small company to attract a recent graduate of a data science program. The third reason, however, is easier to avoid. What I've seen is that a lot of smaller sized companies have biases in the way they interpret data. Their sort of data interpretation maturity is not very high, and they use data in the wrong way. They don't look at underlying sample sizes, or they don't look at the biases in their data, what Danielle referred to as quality, data quality. They often turn a blind eye on data quality. And I think that's what medium and larger size corporations do very well. They really scrutinize for data quality. And the smaller companies, they just take what they can get. And then they realize, oops, we made the wrong decision because we trusted too much the flawed data that we have, right? A lot of data out there is biased, incomplete, outdated, manipulated, inaccurate. And so you need your data scientists usually, or your analysts, that can be either one, to cleanse the data, to check for quality. And that's not something that you can afford not to do. But sometimes I see smaller companies not doing it diligently. And then they are surprised that they made bad decisions based on bad data.
And based on everything Martin just said, it's very complicated and very hard to show the small and medium companies the return of investment of everything we just said, buying all the tools and everything. They will have it, but they'll have to learn how we use those data if in their favor, so they'll have the right the ROI. Otherwise, they won't have it. They won't have it, or they won't see it, and so they keep struggling. I put money here. How I'm going to have the return of it, and it's not very easy to show it. So, and it all has to do with the maturity of the company.
I
Good.
completely agree with
Yes.
Danielle. My top three recommendations, if you are a small company and want to ramp up your analytics capabilities, are start modest, hire students as interns for the low-hanging fruit, customer data usually, right? Let them help you with getting better customer data and using your customer data better. Start small projects with the help of students. Second recommendation, exchange experiences with fellow small companies, right? Create little communities where you can exchange experiences and where you can learn faster by creating alliances with people who are not your competitors, but who are in a similar situation. Learn from each other. That would be my second recommendation. And my third one is you can get a lot of free stuff, right? I'm sure also in Brazil, Microsoft or PeopleSoft or IBM or SAS, they want to grow the small their market share in the small enterprise context. So you can get free versions, trial versions. You can get sometimes free support from them, seminars. Use those big players like Microsoft or IBM or Salesforce or others that have these analytics tools that are often very useful for small companies because they plug into Excel. They use the programs that you're already using or SAP or whatever it is you're using. Use those big players. They can give you a hand. They have a lot of learning resources for free on the web. They might give you trial licenses. They might even, give you free consulting. So use those established players as well.
Very good. I would like to get back to these communication points that both of you mentioned and Martin specifically explored, but still from the maybe the perspective of the experts, which are the chief digital officers, for example. And I read a very interesting article that was saying that maybe one of the most unstable C-suite job is the chief data officer. Tenures are short, turnover is high, and as in the maybe early days of the chief information officer role, many companies don't seem to know exactly what they want from its incumbents. So from the chief digital officers, they don't have clear objectives. So I think you address a bit of that, but I'm sure that one of the elements also is this communication, how they bridge between what they do in their daily basis, more the data management, the data handling, and how it translates into business, how it also translates for people within the company, for other departments. So I would like you maybe to explore a bit of this. So what these experts, what these people that normally need, even if we say that data is for everyone in the company, these people are more specifically related to data. So how they should communicate to be maybe more understood within the company?
That's a great question. Yeah. My 2 cents on this are the following. Keep it balanced, your communication. I see a lot of organizations where the chief data officer not bombards, but communicates a lot about the risks, about the compliance needs, about data protection regulation and data protection measures, about backup needs. There's a lot of burdens that the chief data officers put on the employees. And so it gets a negative reputation because you have to do these compliance trainings about how to handle data, about data security, cybersecurity, about regulatory rules regarding data. And that's a bit of a negative communication. And I think for the chief data officer and the digital officer as well, it's important to also spread the good news, right? Show the benefits of data, how it makes lives easier, how they can help employees more. So I would say keep your communication balanced between what you need to do and is sometimes negatively perceived and the positive effects that data can bring about. Your take, Danielle, on this question?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the most of the companies, a lot of them use the data in a negative ways. I really like the way you showed all the way you should communicate using storytelling. I think it's more fun. I think people should use that more to create a narrative and bring a meaning to that. Comparison, I think, is very good. Once, for example, you use data to release a marketing piece, and if you get to the people comparing how you used to do before and how you improved by using data, getting the results, and showing them how many people, whatever, bought more after you communicated the data or you use the data better. I like a lot of the ways when you compare the data before and after using the right data to the right audience. Comparison is a good thing. And I think you were right when you say communicate more about the good things data are bringing to your company than the negative ones.
Mm.
I think that's it's a very good way. And the way you communicate is very important. My mother would say it's not what you communicate, it's how you communicate that is more important than anything. And that's for life, right? You may want to communicate something not very good, but if you communicate in a nice way, people would get less upset. So the way you communicate is very important.
Good. I think we were focusing a bit more on the roles, specific roles like chief digital officers. Who are they, what they do, and some of the challenges, including communication, like we just saw. But I would like maybe to broaden a bit the spectrum at the moment and go to leaders in general. And I would like to have your view on so what is this data fluency of leaders, managers, what you have seen. You, Martin, maybe more in a European setting, and you, Danny, what is the perspective of data fluency, data literacy for leaders in general in companies in Brazil? Can you give us like a brief panorama of that?
Gladly, Paul. The short answer is they think they know more than they actually do. And we actually researched that, and there's a lot of pseudo knowledge, right? Because everybody talks about data, they believe they have a solid understanding of it. And in our experiments, we've been able to show that there is systematic overconfidence in managers when it comes to analytics and a lot of actually the digital topics, that they think they understand them well, but when you then ask a check question or you ask them to explain certain key concepts, they often fall short. And that's when they start to realize, oh, I need to do my homework. I need to brush up on my digital skills and my analytic skills. So the first step is really making people aware that they don't know, and that they need to ask others for advice, and they need to deepen their analytics skills. And I think then the second step is breaking that down. What are the different components, right? So statistics, unfortunately, is a key part of understanding data. You need to understand what an average is, you know, what the distribution is, what a simple regression is, what cluster analysis is. Those are essential things to understand, even if you're an upper manager, to have good conversations with your data scientists and make the best use of data. That's one part. The other part is how to make analytics work, understanding the different kinds of data that there are, right? From structured to unstructured. And a third area of this data fluency is understanding the infrastructure needed. What are the different software packages? What do you need in terms of infrastructure, hardware, software, and what are the roles that manage this, as we talked about it? So first step is understanding the limits of your own knowledge, knowing that you don't know, as Socrates said. The second step is knowing what the building blocks are, statistics, right? The different kinds of data that there are, how they are managed and kept secure, and the different roles that belong to that, right? And the third step is making a daily habit to learn more about it, to try it out, to maybe download your Netflix data. It's easy to do that, or your Spotify data, and put it into, you know, Tableau or Power BI or just Excel and playing with it, getting your own hands dirty with data, so that you can better assess where are the problems. And you will, if you do that, and I've done that with a number of executives, we have quite a few such courses, they realize the biggest problem with data is data cleansing, getting data into the right format. And that's something that executives typically underestimate. But once they do a small analytics project themselves, they realize 80% of the work is in cleaning the data. And that's quite helpful if they have this firsthand experience. So these are the different steps I would suggest To build data literacy, it all starts with recognizing the limits of your current understanding.
And what about you, Danny? What is your view on?
In Brazil is not different. For sure, people think they know much more than they really know. And what I've been seeing a lot is that a lot of companies say and tell and put in media and LinkedIn that they are data driven. But when you get really to the company, you see that they are really struggling within a lot of ways. And what I've seen like a lot, many times, is people getting ahead of themselves and putting a whole advanced analytics area, working with machine learning and algorithm, and putting a lot of data scientists before they work with data governance and work with their data and get them ready. And so you get those two areas fighting, because this advanced analytics want the data ready, and this one have no ready data to give. So they start advanced analytics before they start in the beginning, which is getting the data ready, getting the data with quality and everything. So that I've been seeing that a lot. It doesn't matter if it's a big company or if it's a small company. I was talking to a friend that works to a pharmaceutical industry, and he's the CDO, and he's supposed to work with algorithms and give some statistic about all they do, but since he got to this company, he hasn't done any kind of work because he has no data to work with, because the data is not ready or not there, which is worst. And that's very common. The people work trying to work with advanced analytics before getting the infrastructure ready. So they have to actually do what Martin said: get small, do your work first before getting ahead of yourself and trying to do very complex algorithms and statistics before you have your data ready.
I think close to what you are bringing, Danny, there's a comment here in the chat from mapping. One issue at the organizations is to have clear idea of what data should be measured. What I see is that data over measuring, no outcomes come from the data. Measuring too much is worse than no measuring. Would you agree with that?
Totally. As I said, I actually had a post on LinkedIn like I think 2 weeks ago, and I emphasized that if you have a wrong data or bad data, you're gonna come with the most awful statistics and wrong ones, and you can really make very bad decisions, business decisions, because your data is wrong. So everything you do with it is gonna come out. The outcome is gonna be very, very bad. It's not reliable. You cannot trust on it. So whatever it comes, it's not reliable either. So yeah, I totally agree with it.
In our book, I remember we wrote in one chapter, one of the biggest mistakes you can make in analytics is simply working with the data that you have, right? It's much better to first start with the questions that you need to answer to make good decisions, and then think about which data do we need, and then check what you have and what you need to collect. But only working with the conveniently available data sometimes is misleading, because it won't allow you to answer the really important questions. And so simply measuring for the measurement's sake, I agree with Mappin there. Simply measuring is not a guarantee that you will make good use of data, that you will have the right data and ultimately good decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think this comes again to why storytelling is so important, because also it helps you focusing on the right questions, and it's not just like data, but you need to think about how you put this data in context. by looking
Yes.
at what you were saying, you know, how you interpret, what are the information that you need to emphasize, which kind of conclusions or moral, like you were saying, you need to have on the data. So I think the fact of just putting, of having this storytelling perspective forces you really to look at data differently as well.
True.
So you do the exercise at the same time as, it's learning by doing.
Yeah, actually going through our 5 magic ingredients, or the data storytelling canvas, tells you whether you do have the right data or not. If you then fail to make a good data story out of it, it's probably because you're not adding value with the data that you've measured, that you've gathered. So I think it's also a good checklist to go through to ensure that your data can provide value when you go through the storytelling process.
Perfect. So I would like to bring some future into our discussions, because this again, this initiative is Futuro do Amanhã. So we try to think at the implications of future, but for today. And one of the questions, I think, and including one question that we have here from André Luis D'Ameto, it's what basic skills should any employee or any future employee in this domain, regardless of the background or the role in the business, have to be active in this data-driven scenario? So what would you say about these skills? Maybe also about how to get started. What do you have to say on that?
Go ahead, Marty.
I think two skills, I would say, and this is not very sexy, but it is basic statistics. Understanding, statistics literacy is really the foundation for data literacy, right? And I'm not just saying that as a scholar, also as somebody who works in a lot of companies. You need to have some basic understanding of statistics, right? And secondly, of biases in data, distortions, cognitive biases of our deviations from rationality and from fair use of data. If I could make a wish, it would only be those 2 things if every employee could have them. A fundamental, and I'm not talking advanced rocket science, really basic statistics understanding. And I'm happy that ever more schools already begin to teach statistics on the primary level in 6th grade. I think that's a great idea. And I'm glad that a lot of companies offer, luncheon webinars on basic statistics. If you want to understand data, you need to understand statistics. But on top of that, as a second element, the knowledge about cognitive biases, about the way our brain systematically abuses data, takes mental shortcuts, overgeneralizes, only looks for data that confirms our prior point of view, doesn't look at the underlying population or sample, population base for a sample, or looks at only most recent data. I think if we had those 2 things, we would be a major step ahead. If we had basic statistics understanding and a general awareness of the biases, the deviations from rationality that are inbuilt in our brain when we use data, we would have come a long way. And if I have a third wish, I would add good data visualization, because that makes the data communication so much easier. And I see so many bad charts in companies, right? Leave the pies for dessert. No more pie charts would be one of my advice. Don't look too far.
Why do you think pies are, just as a clarification, why do you think pies charts are not able to convey correctly the messages?
It's not my opinion. There's tons of research that shows pie charts are perceptually inefficient. They're a bad use of pixel real estate. They scale very badly. Anything that can be shown in a pie chart can be shown much better in a bar chart, right? A bar chart is much better for comparisons. Our eyes have a hard time comparing pie sizes, but they're very good at noticing height differences among bars, right? So it's just more efficient to use bar charts. That's why all experts agree, if you can, eliminate all the pie charts from your dashboards, from your presentations, from your slides. They are an inefficient way to represent data.
Thank you, Martin.
Among all the things I've learned today, this is the most good one. I use a lot of pie charts, so I won't use it anymore. And you were right. I'm sorry, guys. Um, and about that, I couldn't agree more with Martin. I think people should be reading about a lot about data literacy. You have a lot of articles and things that are on the net that you can read it. Statistics for sure is something you have to understand very in a not in a deep way, but in a very highway you should learn about that and read a lot of data literacy. You're going to see a much of tips about that, what you should have.
Okay, thank you very much. We are reaching the end of our debate discussion, but I would like to still quickly discuss one very important topic, and I think you started to mention it, Martin, during your presentation. Is that according to many estimates, we normally have out of 10 data scientists professionals, what we know is that 9 are in general white, and we only have like between 15 and 20% that are women. So can you just give us your view also on this, on the question of diversity when we are talking about data management, about data professions, how to have more also inclusion when we are addressing these topics?
Very important topic. I think it will be good for the analytics field to have more women in it. I think it will be good for the quality of data analytics to have more diversity in terms of ethnic groups, in terms of gender. When you ask me how to get there, I agree with Danielle. It's all about data democratization, making the tools more easily accessible, spreading the knowledge, making it available online. That's what we're doing, giving people lots of opportunities to work with data. You know, here at the university, I'm very happy to report that now for the first time in my visual analytics class, I have half of the participants women, half are men. So I see a trend change that women are embracing this profession as well as they should. And I hope that trend will intensify. I think education is key. And role models are key. And I think on the web, there are already quite a lot of role models that are leading the way for other women. And Danielle is certainly one of them.
Yeah. I think I've been seeing a change in that too. I think it starts like right on the university. You've been seeing a lot of people looking for more courses in graduation in statistics and mathematics and computer science. And if I had to say something to everybody, to my kids, for example, I think they should study data and go to the data market because we don't have enough professionals and we needed them. So if I have to speak about the future of tomorrow in the professional way, I think that's a big chance to everybody. Study data. You have a lot of opportunities in the market and with good salaries and everything because we need people like that and we need women in that because we are more analytical. In some ways we have a lot to bring to the data market. So that's my tip. If you're not graduated yet, go to the data part of of the courses that so you have a lot of opportunities.
Very good. So I would like just now to end this live stream, unfortunately, but giving you the opportunity for each of you to maybe bring some of your conclusions, most important messages, like in 1 minute. What would you like to share with our audience? Who wants to start?
I can start. What I want to share is that as you've seen, data is not the future, data is now. The company should be data driven right now. It's not something that's going to be happening in 5 years or 3 years. It's happening right now. They'll have to do that in order to be more successful and to survive to this very competitive market. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to people to work on this field. And so I invite everybody to look to this field very carefully, because it's just the future of tomorrow, really tomorrow. So come and join us in this matter, because it's been fun to be here and to learn all about data and to work with it. So I invite people to do the same.
And for me, it's again the design principles, that I mentioned, the 6 things I would share. Make your data decluttered. Let the data speak for it. Emphasize what is most important. Use the 5 elements to storify data. Have a good dramaturgy to it and emotion. Involve your audiences and check for understanding. Give meaning to your data through comparisons. And make sure you're not distorting data in the way that you're visualizing it, right? Stay clear of things like pie charts or double y-axis. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I would like to thank you, our audience. That was very participative today. I would like to thank you, Danny, for your participation as well, and to bring these very practitioner-oriented insights and information about how you see things here also in Brazil. I think it's very important for our audience. Martin, thank you very much also for your presentation, all the material that you have made also available. And again, if you want to continue follow our initiative, you can go directly to our website, o amanhã do futuro do trabalho.org.br. We will have, I think, still before the end of the year, we will have another event. And we have many private events and also materials that you can find there. And I really, really thank you because if I could rephrase what Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize, was saying, what information and specifically information overload consumes is our attention. And I think you were very helpful in helping us understand where do we focus our attention. Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Oh, bye.
Obrigado. Até logo. Bye-bye.